Okay, hi, hello everyone. Let's talk degrowth. It's a degrowth workshop. So my name is Vlad Bunea. I'm an economist. I'm an author. I'm an organizer. I co-founded the International Degrowth Network, and I founded the Degrowth Collective. So I'm not all about degrowth, but this is my recent focus. It's my recent discovery after the pandemic. So in these 30 slides, I'll go fast through a lot of data and try to make a case for why we need degrowth to get out of the crises, the many crises we have. This is a history of economics, roughly of 400 years packed into a graph. On the left, you have capitalism, that it's connected through those three elements. That's what I call the threefold model of capitalism. We are now in the present, where we breach 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries, climate change being just one of them. So this is not looking great at all. And degrowth is the pathway that takes us from the present into a future. The entire humanity is in the safe and just space, the light green area that's described by the donut economics model. So degrowth is a toolkit, is a path, is not an ideology. This is a definition of degrowth in words. And I'll just read it and I will maybe unpack it later in the conversation. So degrowth is the expansion of social agency and well-being for all humans within the limits of Earth by reducing production and consumption to lighten the ecological footprint, planned democratically in the spirit of social justice. So there's a lot packed into this definition. Timotei Parik wrote an entire book about the definition, so I urge you to read it. But it basically tells you that degrowth is a toolkit that has a name, it addresses issues, and it offers the solutions to get to a desired future. But mainly, the center of the definition in purple, it's what degrowth is about. It's the reduction of production and consumption. It's putting the economy on a diet. Everything has to shrink so we come back within planetary boundary as a society on average. If you want to read the definition in many books, there you go. This is just a small selection of what we have on our website, degrowth.net. I like to highlight the book in yellow, The Future is Degrowth. Timotei Parik's book is in the middle in blue, is being translated in English. Slow Down or Perish, Ralentir ou Périr. It's one of my favorites. I read all of them and they're all great, and there's hundreds more. A bit of history. Since about the 1950s, we have gone through what is known as the Great Acceleration. Everything has accelerated: population, extraction of resources, the output of the economy, demand of energy. Everything has accelerated exponentially, unlike in the previous few hundred years, where you can just see like a slow rise in the presence of humans on Earth. And we are now in what's known as the ecological deficit. That means that we are doing a kind of economy that oversteps the biocapacity of Earth, of what Earth can provide and absorb from the economy in terms of waste. If you want to look at it in another way, on the right side, the Earth Overshoot Day gives us a picture of how much we use more than what Earth can provide. And on average, as a civilization, we're at 1.75 Earths against one Earth that we live on. So we use the resources of almost 2 Earths to do the living on one planet. More data from the Great Acceleration. On the left, you see, by comparison, rich versus poor countries. We don't all have the same footprint. We do not have the same biocapacity at our disposal. There's huge inequalities between rich and poor countries, and they continue to grow. On the right side, you have a reference point, 1970, and you can see, for example, labor in yellow, how fast it grew in terms of economic presence in the economy, and the others are resources, energy, and materials. Many more angles about the acceleration. This is in terms of socioeconomic trends. You can see population, GDP, everything just went up exponentially after the 1950s. We don't go into details. There's many explanations to why this has happened and how it happened. More data about Earth system trends, which has to do with resources, climate change, everything that's considered an input into the economy, what we use to provide for the needs of humans and consumers. Now you can see this animation, how energy use per capita tends to go up in correlation with GDP per capita. The largest two circles are India and China. The size is by population. So even those countries have an ascending trend as they accumulate more stuff and have an increased lifestyle and well-being. You can see by contrast a poor country, Burundi, how it compares to Qatar in terms of energy use per capita and their GDP. We can ask ourselves, is this fair that some countries like live on a low energy footprint or low energy use with the low income, while others just live in debauchery pretty much? The idea with degrowth is to create an economy where all these countries are on a narrow band in the middle, where everything is in balance. So the poor countries have to increase more in terms of well-being, while the richest countries have to put themselves on a diet. This is what the circular economy tells us that we have to do. This is just 2022 data. At the bottom, we see that about 32 gigatons, that's billion tons of stuff, is being wasted, and only about 8.6 billion tons is being recycled into the economy. And now every year, we extract and we put a fresh 100 gigatons of stuff every year into the economy, fresh stuff. The circular economy doesn't work if the waste continues and if the trend keeps going up in terms of extraction. So this has to stop the extraction, go down a little bit, and reach like a steady state level. Now, can we do energy without fossil fuels? Yes, but it's very, very difficult. This is a model from Simon Michaud. He's a prof in working for the Geological Survey of Finland. So you can see the gas and oil and coal that on the left side, that's what we have to phase out. And all of that has to be replaced with green energy, which is on the right side. That's about 26,000 terawatt hours. And to do that kind of economy, we need stuff, we need resources, which in most cases we don't have. Like to do that transition in a conservative scenario, we will need this much metal on the left, while we have the resources on the right side. There just isn't enough stuff. Sure, if you dig up entire mountain chains like the Andes, you can find the necessary copper, but that extraction process itself requires fossil fuels. We cannot extract metals without fossil fuels. All those excavators run on diesel and other fuels. So it's almost impossible to do it without them. One example, a windmill, if we were to replace the entire grid of fossil fuels with windmills, we would need that much coal to produce the steel that goes into the windmill. There isn't a technology that makes windmills without fossil fuels. To make steel without fossil fuels, you might have to use electric arc furnaces, which have a very, very limited capacity to recycle metal. And they are used only to recycle steel. They cannot produce new metals from ore. So it's almost impossible to make any infrastructure that is green without fossil fuels. What we are promised and what we get. Personal lifestyles as opposed to traffic. That's the promise of green growth. They want innovation, they want a lot of efficiency, but they forget to tell us the full picture, how we source those materials, how we use them to make the stuff that we are promised, and in the end, what end results do we have? Other economists say, okay, let's increase income, let's make people richer, and they'll be happier. This person, Richard Esterlin, found a paradox that above a certain threshold of income, happiness and life satisfaction doesn't go up. So there's a threshold in income that doesn't make you happier. And that tends to be around today about $60,000, $70,000 per year. A little bit about competing ideologies. This is from a book by Professor Peter Victor. He shows that degrowth is one of the approaches towards the transformation. And I would like to argue for more nuance. The items you see on the right, they are concepts that I argue they are not actually compatible. You are talking ideologies versus lifestyles versus philosophies. Buen vivir, for example, is a lifestyle that's being practiced in South America for hundreds of years. You cannot make an economic system from that. It's a lifestyle, it's a philosophy. So the economy that we need has elements of all these items. Degrowth is a toolkit. The donut economy is a model that works better for cities. I'm just making you aware of the different approaches. Focusing also only on greenhouse gas emissions is not enough. We have breached 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries. The climate is just one of them. We must focus on the entire picture, not just emissions. On the left, you have the emissions of Canada. On the right side, the emissions by sector worldwide. So if you drill down, you can see the energy used in buildings is 17%, transport is 16%. All of that, if you zoom out enough, it's just one of the 6 planetary boundaries. So how do we fix it? How does degrowth phase out capitalism and takes us to a model that looks probably like that? We are not sure yet if the donut economics is the real model. Thinking about lifestyle is one possible answer. You see the threshold, like the targets, is 2.5 tons per person per year by 2030 and 0.7. Nobody is in that target, not even Indonesia at 2.2. Canada's way off the charts. Can we change our lifestyles enough, voluntary, to get within those limits? It's almost impossible, I would argue, that so thinking just about changing your lifestyle is not enough. You always have to remember the bigger picture and where you stand in the world compared to other countries. Economic democracy is also part of the degrowth toolkit. Capitalism is usually structured on what I call a proportionality relation between power and property. That's why you have corporations structured like that. X number of shares give you X number of votes. As opposed to liberal democracy, where a citizen has one vote. We should phase out this capitalist model that's virtually undemocratic with one person equals one vote system that applies in the economy as well. That is largely what is known as economic democracy. Okay, how about money? This is very important. I need you to know this, that there's a theory called the modern monetary theory that describes the financial system differently than the status quo. We're told a lot about deficits, that governments have to spend money to get things done, and that causes budget deficits. And this is a big talking point on the right-wing parties. But just remember from MMT that every time you hear the word deficit, there's also surplus. When someone has a deficit, someone else has a surplus. It's very, very important to remember this distinction. So when you talk about government budget deficit, that equals private sector surplus. That's what the government deficit is. It's when the private sector is in a surplus. What does this mean for us and for degrowth is that a country that has its own currency, like Canada, can literally print and issue as much money as it wants for whatever policy they need, as long as it does not cause inflation. So the question about do we have money to pay for free transit or a green transition? Yes. By definition, yes, we have the money. The question is, does it cause inflation? And that's the question that needs to be asked. And the answer to that question is, it does not cause inflation if there is enough productive capacity in the economy to do the necessary work for that green transition. Namely, if there's enough labor force, if there's enough materials, enough land, enough know-how, if that's enough, yes, we have money to do it. And it will not cause inflation. It's about the productive capacity of the economy. That's what keeps the inflation in check. Degrowth has a lot of policy proposals, which are literally what governments are supposed to do to get things done in the society. This is just the highlight of some of my favorites. We could have a basic income for all Canadians, which is essentially like during COVID, the CERB program, but permanent no questions asked for all adults, a guaranteed monthly income, phase out poverty, and to address economic inequalities. But there's just one policy in the package. There's hundreds of them. It's important to remember that degrowth is not a permanent ideology or a concept. It's a transition. Ideally, it shouldn't take us more than 30 years to do degrowth until we bring the economy within planetary boundaries. So it's a transition just to bring us from the overshoot perspective into a balance with Earth. And degrowth is also about a new lifestyle that can emerge both from within, from yourself. If you realize that the current system doesn't work for you, you will feel yourself transform in such a way that you will just want to live differently. You won't be motivated to chase wealth or status. It will be a different lifestyle with different values. And degrowth is also about connection. It's phasing out the individualist mindset, which is very important at the core of the degrowth philosophy. There's a huge focus on community within degrowth, or learning to depend on the others, learning to let yourself be needed by others. And this is something more of a motivational slide, something that you might find in degrowth literature, how to think as a degrowther. It's just some highlights that I found in literature. These are sources for what I said. And thank you for your attention, and let's have a conversation.
It is an honor to meet you.
Lieutenant Commander Data.
It is a pleasure to meet such a unique individual.